A 42-year-old surgeon stands before Judge Caprio. Red light violation. School zone speeding. Clear evidence on camera. Judge Caprio reviews the footage. Dr. Brennan, the video shows you ran a red light and were traveling 48 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour school zone. The doctor crosses his arms. Your Honor, I was responding to a patient emergency. I had just received a call that one of my post-op patients was experiencing complications. I understand. However, you still violated traffic laws in a school zone where children were present. Dr. Brennan's face hardens. With all due respect, Judge, I save lives for a living. What I do is considerably more important than issuing traffic tickets. The courtroom goes silent. Did a doctor just tell a judge that his work doesn't matter? Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in the air. Dr. Brennan, having a medical degree doesn't exempt you from showing respect in my courtroom, or following the same laws as everyone else. What happens next, when this arrogant doctor learns that saving lives doesn't give you permission to endanger them, becomes the most satisfying medical professional takedown ever recorded. Subscribe, because this surgeon is about to get a lesson his medical school never taught him. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m. Case 24893, Dr. Marcus Brennan, traffic violations, school zone. A man in his early 40s approaches. Expensive suit, designer watch, leather briefcase. Everything about him communicates success, status, money. His posture is perfect, the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in every room he enters. Good morning, Dr. Brennan. Good morning, Your Honor. Polite enough, but there's an edge, like he's already calculating how to minimize his time here. Dr. Brennan, you're cited for 2 violations that occurred on the morning of September 23rd. The first is failure to stop at a red traffic signal. The second is excessive speed in a school zone, 48 in a 25. Both of these are serious. Marcus nods. I'm aware of the charges. I'd like to provide context before we proceed. Go ahead. That morning, I received an emergency call from the hospital. One of my surgical patients, a woman I'd operated on 2 days prior, was showing signs of internal bleeding. Life-threatening situation. I was 15 minutes away. Every minute mattered. He says this with the practiced calm of someone who's explained complex medical situations to worried families 1,000 times. Judge Caprio listens. I appreciate that context. However, you drove through a red light and exceeded the speed limit by 23 miles per hour in an area where children were walking to school. I understand the optics aren't ideal, but you have to weigh that against the alternative. If I'd stopped at that light, if I'd driven the speed limit, my patient could have died. We're talking about a human life, Your Honor. We're also talking about the lives of children who were in that school zone. What if you'd hit one of them while driving 48 miles per hour? Marcus's jaw tightens slightly. I'm an excellent driver. I had complete control of my vehicle. I assessed the situation and determined I could proceed safely. The red light was red for 3 seconds before you entered the intersection. That's not assessing. That's ignoring traffic signals. Because I had an emergency. Surely the court recognizes that medical emergencies warrant some flexibility in enforcement. Judge Caprio sets down his pen. Dr. Brennan, let me be clear about something. If you had been driving with lights and sirens, if you were in an ambulance or emergency vehicle, that would be different. But you were in your personal vehicle. You're not exempt from traffic laws simply because you're a doctor responding to a patient. Marcus's expression shifts, frustration creeping in. So what was I supposed to do? Drive slowly while my patient bled out? Call an ambulance that would take 20 minutes to arrive? I made a split-second decision that saved someone's life. Did your patient survive? Yes, because I got there in time to intervene. If I'd followed every traffic law to the letter, she wouldn't have. You don't know that. I'm a surgeon with 18 years of experience. I absolutely know that. Minutes matter in internal hemorrhaging. The difference between life and death. There's a confidence in his voice that borders on condescension, like he's explaining basic anatomy to a first-year medical student. Judge Caprio pulls up the red light camera footage. Let me show you something, Dr. Brennan. The screen displays the intersection. The light is clearly red. Marcus's Mercedes approaches at high speed, doesn't slow down, drives straight through. A pedestrian in the crosswalk has to stop abruptly. A car with the green light has to brake hard to avoid a collision. You see that pedestrian? You came within about 10 feet of hitting her. Marcus leans forward, studying the screen. But I didn't hit her. I saw her. I adjusted my path. No contact, no danger. She had to stop walking to avoid you. That's dangerous driving. That's defensive driving on her part. I had situational awareness. I knew where she was. Judge Caprio looks at him directly. Dr. Brennan, you seem to be missing the point here. You endangered other people while claiming to be saving one person. That's not heroic. That's reckless. Reckless? Marcus's voice rises slightly. I make life or death decisions every single day. I hold human hearts in my hands. I determine whether people live or die based on split-second choices under immense pressure. Driving through one red light to save a patient's life is not reckless. It's necessary. It's illegal. Sometimes the law and medical necessity conflict. In those situations, I choose to save lives. And in those situations, you face consequences
For breaking the law. That's what we're here to determine. Marcus shakes his head.
Your Honor, I don't mean any disrespect, but I think you're focusing on the wrong thing here. Yes, technically I violated traffic codes, but the outcome was positive. My patient lived. Shouldn't that count for something? The outcome was fortunate, but you could just as easily have killed that pedestrian or caused an accident with the other vehicle. Good luck doesn't excuse bad judgment. It wasn't luck. It was skill and experience. Judge Caprio takes a breath. This man is not hearing him. Dr. Brennan, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Do you believe you did anything wrong that morning? Marcus considers this. When he speaks, his tone is measured but firm. I believe I made the best decision available to me given the circumstances. If faced with the same situation tomorrow, I would do exactly the same thing. So no, you don't think you did anything wrong. I think I prioritized human life over traffic regulations. If that's wrong in the eyes of the law, then I suppose I'm guilty. But morally, ethically, I stand by my actions completely. There's no remorse in his voice, no acknowledgement of the danger he created. Just absolute certainty that his judgment was correct. Judge Caprio leans back in his chair. Dr. Brennan, have you ever heard the expression, first do no harm? Of course. It's a foundational principle of medical ethics. Does that principle only apply inside a hospital? Or does it extend to your behavior outside as well? Marcus pauses. He sees where this is going, but doesn't like it. I understand what you're suggesting, but the situations aren't comparable, aren't they? You took an action, speeding through a school zone and running a red light, that could have harmed multiple people, including children. You justify it by saying you were trying to help one person. But do no harm doesn't have exceptions for convenience. This wasn't convenience. This was a medical emergency. Then you should have called 911. You should have had the hospital send an ambulance. You should have had another surgeon cover you. There were legal, safe options available. You chose the illegal, dangerous one. Marcus's face flushes. Because the legal options would have been too slow. By the time an ambulance arrived, by the time another surgeon scrubbed in, my patient could have been dead. And by driving 48 in a school zone, a child could have been dead. But that didn't happen. Because you got lucky, not because you made a good decision. They're both getting louder now. The courtroom is transfixed. Marcus struggles to compose himself. Your Honor, I'm trying to be respectful here, but I fundamentally disagree with your characterization of events. What I did was not reckless. It was calculated. I'm trained to assess risk and make rapid decisions under pressure. That's literally my job. Your job is to operate on patience. Your job is
not to determine which traffic laws apply to you. I didn't say laws don't apply to me. I said circumstances matter, context matters. And in this specific situation, I made a judgment call that saved a life. Judge Caprio studies him for a long moment. Dr. Brennan, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you regret your actions that morning? Not the outcome, I understand your patient survived. But do you regret the way you handled the situation? Marcus meets his gaze. Doesn't blink. No, Your Honor, I don't. Judge Caprio sets down his reading glasses. Dr. Brennan, are you willing to apologize to this court for endangering other people? Apologize for saving someone's life? No, I'm not. I'm not asking you to apologize for saving your patient. I'm asking you to apologize for the way you endangered others in the process. Marcus's jaw sets. I didn't endanger anyone. I controlled the situation. You came 10 feet from hitting a pedestrian, but I didn't hit her. You caused another driver to slam on their brakes to avoid hitting you, but there was no collision. Dr. Brennan, do you understand the difference between a good outcome and good judgment? I understand that results matter. In medicine, we're judged by outcomes. Did the patient live or die? That's what matters. This isn't medicine. This is law. And in law, we judge actions, not just outcomes. You can make a terrible decision that happens to work out. That doesn't make it a good decision. I disagree. I think my decision was sound. Judge Caprio's voice hardens. Then let me put it another way. If I asked you to stand before this court and say, I'm sorry for running a red light and speeding in a school zone, would you be willing to do that? Marcus doesn't hesitate. No. Why not? Because I'm not sorry. I did what was necessary. Apologizing would be dishonest, even if an apology might result in a reduced penalty. I'm not going to lie to avoid consequences. That's not who I am. There's a strange integrity to this. He's refusing to apologize not because he's being stubborn, but because he genuinely believes he did nothing wrong. In his mind, he's being honest. Judge Caprio sees this, respects it even, but can't let it stand. Dr. Brennan, I appreciate your honesty, truly. But your refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing in this situation concerns me deeply, because it suggests that you believe your profession, your expertise, and your judgment place you above the rules that govern everyone else. That's not what I believe. Then what do you believe? I believe that sometimes, in rare, extreme circumstances, the right thing to do conflicts with the legal thing to do. And when I'm faced with that choice, I'm going to choose saving a life, even if it means endangering other lives in the process. I didn't endanger anyone. You believe you didn't. But you were traveling at nearly twice the speed limit in a school zone. You ran a red light in a busy intersection. Those actions are inherently dangerous, regardless of your skill level. Marcus takes a breath. Your Honor, I've tried to explain my perspective. Clearly, we see this situation very differently. What I consider necessary medical intervention, you consider reckless driving. I don't think we're going to find common ground here. I don't need common ground, Dr. Brennan. I need you to understand that having an MD after your name doesn't give you special privileges on the road. It doesn't mean you get to decide which laws apply to you based on your personal assessment of the situation. I never said I was above the law. But you're standing here refusing to apologize for breaking it. You're saying you'd do the exact same thing again. How is that not placing yourself above the law? Marcus has no response to that. His silence speaks volumes. Judge Caprio types something into his computer. Dr. Brennan, here's my ruling. For the red light violation and excessive speed in a school zone, I'm fining you $750. Marcus nods. Expected. He can afford it. Additionally, you're required to complete a defensive driving course focused specifically on school zone safety. 8 hours, to be completed within 90 days. A driving course? Your Honor, I don't need— You just told me you'd make the same decision again. That tells me you do need additional education about the dangers of your behavior. The course is mandatory. This is ridiculous. I'm a surgeon. I don't have time to sit through some basic driving class designed for teenagers. Then you should have thought about that before you decided traffic laws didn't apply to your emergency. The ruling stands. $750. 8 hours of defensive driving. If you fail to complete either within 90 days, your license will be suspended. Marcus stares at Judge Caprio. Your Honor, respectfully, I think you're making an example of me because I'm a doctor. If I were anyone else, would the penalty be this severe? If anyone else stood in my courtroom and refused to apologize for endangering school children, refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, and stated they'd do the exact same thing again, yes, they'd receive the same penalty. This isn't about your profession. It's about your attitude. My attitude is that human life matters more than traffic citations. And my attitude is that all human lives matter, including the pedestrian you nearly hit, the children in that school zone, and the other drivers on the road. You don't get to decide that your patient's life is worth more than theirs. Marcus's face is red. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, you're arguing that breaking the law is acceptable when you deem it necessary. That's not how a society functions. Society functions because people like me are willing to take risks to save lives. And society functions because people like me enforce rules that keep everyone safe, including rules that prevent doctors from driving 48 miles per hour past elementary schools. They're at an impasse, both convinced they're right. Judge Caprio's voice softens slightly, but loses none of its authority. Dr. Brennan, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. What you did that morning, maybe it did save your patient's life. I'll give you that. But it also could have ended someone else's. And the fact that you can't acknowledge that possibility, can't express even the smallest bit of regret for the risk you created, that troubles me. I assessed the risk and determined it was acceptable. You don't get to determine that. That's the point. You're not God. You're not infallible. You're a human being who makes mistakes just like everyone else. And when you drive through red lights and speed through school zones, you're not making a heroic medical decision. You're making a dangerous driving decision. I saved a woman's life that day. And I'm grateful for that. Truly. But that doesn't erase the danger you created for others. Marcus is silent. Finally, he asks, Is there anything I can say that would change your ruling? Judge Caprio considers this. An apology might have. Some acknowledgement that, while your intentions were good, your execution was dangerous. Some expression of regret for the risk you imposed on others. But you've made it clear you're not willing to offer any of those things. Because I don't believe them. Then we're finished here. $750. 8 hours of defensive driving. 90 days to comply. If you wish to appeal, you have that right. But my ruling stands. Marcus picks up his briefcase. I'll pay the fine. I'll take the course. But I won't apologize for doing what I thought was right. That's your choice. But I hope someday you understand the difference between good intentions and good decisions. Subscribe to Judge Stories if you believe having a medical degree doesn't excuse endangering others. Marcus pays his fine at the clerk's window. $750. Barely a dent in his surgeon's salary. The money isn't the punishment. The defensive driving course, though?
That stings. 8 hours of his valuable time, sitting in a classroom with people who got DUIs and reckless driving charges. It feels humiliating. But he shows up. 2 Saturdays, 4 hours each. The instructor is a former highway patrol officer named Jack Reeves, who's been teaching these courses for 12 years. During the lunch break on the first Saturday, Jack approaches Marcus. "You're the doctor from the Judge Caprio case, right?" Marcus tenses. Word gets around. "Small community. Look, I'm not here to lecture you, but can I tell you something?" "Do I have a choice?" Jack smiles slightly. "In my 23 years in highway patrol, you know what I responded to? Accidents in school zones. And they're not like regular accidents. They're worse. Because when you hit a kid at 48 miles per hour, they don't walk away. They don't even usually survive." Marcus's jaw tightens. "I didn't hit anyone. This time. But here's what I learned over 2 decades. Every single driver who caused a fatal accident in a school zone, you know what they said? I was in control. I was paying attention. I thought I could make it. That's not the same, it's exactly the same. You thought you were special. You thought your reflexes, your judgment, your importance made you exempt from the physics of what happens when metal hits flesh at high speed." Marcus has no response. Jack continues. "I pulled bodies out of cars, Doc. Little bodies. Kids who were just walking to school. And you know what haunts me? Most of those drivers were good people. They weren't drunk. They weren't texting. They were just in a hurry. They thought they had it under control. Until they didn't." 3 months later, Marcus is driving through the same school zone, going exactly 25 miles per hour. A kid on a bike swerves suddenly into the road, dropped something, trying to grab it. Marcus brakes smoothly, stops with 20 feet to spare. The kid grabs his item, waves apologetically, bikes off. If Marcus had been going 48 like before, that kid would be dead. He sits there for a moment, hands trembling on the wheel. For the first time, he truly understands what Judge Caprio was trying to tell him, what Jack was trying to tell him. It wasn't about that one time he got lucky. It was about every time after. About recognizing that speed limits in school zones exist because kids are unpredictable. Because reaction time matters. Because being in control isn't the same as being safe. The video of his case went viral, over 2 million views. Arrogant doctor refuses to apologize to Judge Caprio. Surgeon learns medical degree doesn't mean special driving privileges. I save lives, you issue tickets. Doctor's comeback backfires. Comments ranged from supportive, he was saving a life, to critical. No excuse for endangering kids. Marcus reads them all, and slowly, painfully, begins to understand that both things can be true. He might have saved his patient, and he might have killed someone else. 6 months later, someone asks him about the case. "Do you still think you did the right thing?" Marcus pauses. "I think I did something with good intentions that could have had catastrophic consequences. I got lucky, and luck isn't a strategy." "Would you apologize now if you could?" "To Judge Caprio? Yes. To that pedestrian I almost hit? Absolutely. To the parents of kids in that school zone? Without question." "What changed?" "I stopped thinking of myself as the hero of the story. Started thinking about everyone else in the story, too. It's not a perfect transformation. He's still proud, still confident in his abilities. But he drives differently now. Follows school zone limits. Stops at red lights. Not because he fears tickets, but because he finally understands what's at stake." Judge Caprio's lesson, delivered with $750 and 8 hours of classes. Your expertise in one domain doesn't transfer to another. Your importance doesn't exempt you from rules designed to protect others. And refusing to apologize doesn't make you principled. Sometimes it just makes you wrong. Dr. Marcus Brennan walked into court believing his medical expertise and life-saving work gave him moral authority to bend traffic laws. He left with a $750 fine, mandatory driving classes, and a lesson about humility. Judge Caprio proved that saving lives in an operating room doesn't justify endangering lives on the road, that good intentions don't erase dangerous actions, and that refusing to apologize isn't strength. Sometimes it's just stubbornness. Marcus learned that being right in one situation doesn't make you right in all situations, that expertise has limits, and that first, do no harm applies everywhere, not just in hospitals. Comment: was Judge Caprio too harsh, or did this doctor need the wake-up call?